This remarkable photograph was found on the internet. Less remarkable was the lack of clues on the website as to where the picture came from and how it came to be taken. The photograph provoked the usual questions of attribution that all photographs do. Who did it show? Who took it? When? Where? And why? Was the intent to create something more than a prank photo? Was it meant to be a comment on the culture it came from? It's assumed that photographs show reality, and in a way they do, but at some level they're essentially ambiguous and open to different readings or interpretations. There may be layers of meaning, sometimes intended by the photographer, sometimes given by the viewer who adds their own references and draws their own conclusions. A photograph of a child is just a photograph of a child, unless it's a photograph of your child. Because this photograph had no caption and was found on the Tumblr page as part of a collection of found vintage photographs, any interpretation had to be subjective, although we could make some deductions. We could see a woman wearing a witch's hat stood in front of an explosion. The mushroom cloud suggested it was an atomic explosion. US atmospheric testing ended in 1963, so the photograph had to have been from the early part of the Cold War. The square format and shape of the border told us it was a Polaroid camera. Although these were comparatively expensive, they were mainly used by amateurs for snapshotting. The use of Polaroid film meant it was most likely American, and surely people in the Soviet Union didn't dress up for a lark. But these were deductions rather than answers. There were more questions though. Mushroom clouds are usually big. The scale and perspective of the photograph seemed odd, as did the scenario. Could someone physically get themselves into that proximity with an atomic bomb? In 1950s America, watching atomic explosions at the Nevada testing grounds was an almost patriotic pastime. The city of Las Vegas promoted the near-monthly tests as a free fireworks show for tourists. Service personnel were deliberately put near blasts to see if troops could operate on nuclear battlefields. There was even an alarming sounding test held in 1957 when 5 volunteers stood at ground zero, directly under an airburst nuclear explosion.
We felt a heat pulse, a very bright light, a fireball. It is red, the sky looks black about it. It is boiling above us there. It is rapidly losing its color. There is the ground wave. It is over, folks. It happened.
They all survived and lived into old age. The Cold War was so full of bizarre experiences, an atomic witch didn't seem so unbelievable anyway. Perhaps the bomb was set off on Halloween. America had emerged from the Second World War as a global superpower, the only country to have atomic weapons. This monopoly ended in 1949 when, several years earlier than expected, the USSR exploded its own bomb. The Soviets had been helped with secret American research leaked to them by people who were concerned at the dangers of an American nuclear monopoly. After all, America had dropped nuclear bombs on cities already. Within a year of the Soviet bomb, Senator Joseph McCarthy began his witch hunts against people he branded communists, and 3 years later Julius and Ethel Rosenberg would be executed for passing secrets to the USSR. The Cold War, a phrase invented by George Orwell, would define world politics for the next 40 years. A rampant anti-communist witch fever characterised America, and in a paradox that continues into the 21st century, the most powerful nation in history is also one of the most paranoid. I would have loved to believe that the photograph was real. If it was as it seemed, it must surely be read as a comment on McCarthy's Cold War witch hunts. Websites such as Tumblr and Flickr have allowed masses of old photographs to be collected, curated and discovered by new audiences, albeit with all the problems collections without captions, context or explanation have. They are virtual galleries where all the labels have been lost. Many of the pictures exhibited originated as traditional silver photographs, so lack the EXIF data that might at least date them. EXIF, which is an acronym for Exchangeable Image File, is a standardised format that stores data about a digital image as part of the image file itself. It includes technical information, such as lens and exposure details, along with the time and date a photograph was taken, and sometimes even the GPS coordinates of where it was taken. A complaint about the rise of digital photos is that because they are often shared online rather than printed out and stuck in an album, they lack captions or dates written on the back that future viewers would find of interest. In fact, EXIF data, together with comments added to photographs online, can provide a level of additional context far greater than we get with boxes of found flea market snapshots. There is, however, some concern that some websites strip EXIF data out, denying us a resource, not to mention creating difficulties over attribution and copyright for the creators. However, there are other web-based tools that can help trace the origin of such photographs. One is TinEye, which describes itself as a reverse image search engine. On its website you can upload or link to a picture and it will find out where an image came from, how it is being used, if modified versions of the image exist, and if there is a higher resolution version. Crucially, it uses image identification technology rather than keywords, metadata, or watermarks to do this. TinEye found 68 versions of the witch photograph. The first 10 were identical, but on the 11th and every subsequent version, the picture format became rectangular, and the witch disappeared, leaving just an explosion. These photographs did have captions. The explosion itself was not Halloween in Vegas, but rather Joe 1, the American code name for First Lightning, the first Russian atomic bomb test. It confirmed the witch photograph was made up of 2 separate images. What's more, the image of the explosion was actually a still frame from a movie. It was a disappointment. The power of a photograph over a painting is the belief that a photograph must show a moment of reality. To me, it had seemed inspiring that there had been someone in the middle of a paranoid America at the height of the Cold War who had made a statement, even an absurdist polemical one. Knowing the photograph was a construct diminished this. The suspicion now was that the photograph was constructed after the end of the Cold War. The intent seemed very postmodern and knowing. Of course, photo montage predated Photoshop. The techniques of adding or removing elements from different pictures had been perfected in the Soviet Union, where photographs were altered to suit political expediency. Trotsky, for example, was removed from photographs with Lenin to diminish his role in the Bolshevik Revolution to suit Stalin's version of events. The question now was, who had made the image of the witch and the atom bomb, and with what intent? Isolating the witch in the foreground from the explosion in the background and submitting it to TinEye did not yield any results. So the origin of the witch photo remains unknown. But the combined image was found to have been part of an exhibition by Julien Paco, a French artist and illustrator who is in demand for his retro-inspired montages, which often use vintage source material. The title of the exhibition told the story: 66 Polaroids that never existed. It ran at the Gallery Deluxe Gallery in Nova Scotia in 2006. Most of the other images in the exhibition were much more obviously constructs, but several of the most arresting also used a combination of 2 photographs to create a bizarre yet possible narrative. The gallery described Paco's exhibition as an abstract yet oddly photorealistic look into an impossible world of illusions and phantasmagorias. By using a Polaroid frame, Paco confuses our pop culture sensibilities into thinking that the world could exist somehow, since Polaroids are known for capturing a realistic instantaneous moment in time. This collision of reality and surreality, plus Paco's intense sense of black humour and his affinity for lists and collections, were the inspirations for this series. Paco had shown the image under his pseudonym Drahomia on DeviantArt.com, where people loved it, although one comment wished, if only this were real. Another asked him how he came up with it, and added that he found it disturbing and twisted. Paco said, "I don't think that it was so disturbing a picture. I don't really know how I came up with it. It's something about a theme which interests me, creating a parallel between childhood and violence." Photo montage, of course, has long been used to create political art. John Hartfield's anti-Nazi works, and more recently Peter Kennard's anti-war illustrations, are amongst the best known. However, most of 66 Polaroids that never existed seemed inspired with an interest in creating surrealist-inspired bizarreness, so the Atomic Witch had to be viewed as an example of whimsy, more than the political activism of Hartfield or Kennard. It was still the same visually arresting image it was before its origins had been discovered, and still a valid work, but it could not escape the context that its creator had placed it in. Work cannot be judged in isolation, and when known, the creator's intent had to be considered in any reading of an image. Atomic explosions have, to use Yeats's phrase, a terrible beauty. Thomas F. Farrell, a Los Alamos laboratory official, described the first explosion at the Trinity site in 1945 as that beauty the great poets dream about, but describe most poorly and inadequately. The mushroom cloud was a defining image of the post-war world. It caused a sense of awe, wonder, and eventually terror and fear as the threat of atomic war between the two superpowers became real after the detonation of Joe 1. Not surprisingly, others have used mushroom clouds as a motif in montages, though these too are largely knowing, postmodern humorous constructions. A notable exception was Peter Cannard's 2005 work Photo Op, which combined a non-nuclear explosion with a grinning Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair seemingly taking a self-portrait in front of it with a mobile phone. The image was arresting, and its intent a clear telling critique of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and a cutting comment on the character of the then Prime Minister. And it is because of Kennard's clear intent that it is ultimately a stronger image, and one that is an iconic statement on the post-Cold War consumerist world.